Welcome to Teachers Transition Podcast, a show dedicated to supporting teachers transition in, through, and out of education. Grab your seat and let's talk about how to make your next transition a successful one.
Hey, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Alex Curtin, host of Teachers Transition Podcasts, a podcast that's helping teachers transition in, transition through their education, and in some cases, transition out. I'm so happy to have a special guest, and her name is Miss Kendal.
Yeah, so I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Alex. As you mentioned, my name is Kendal Askins, and I am an educator. I have known that I've wanted to be an educator since I was 3 years old, like literally since I could speak. I'm looking forward to sharing that journey. And in addition to what I do professionally, I am also a mom of 4 beautiful children and a CEO of my own company. So I'm looking forward to just being here today and just sharing some of my journey with everyone.
Awesome. And if you're listening, we're going to have her back for maybe 1 or 2 more episodes because she contains a wealth of experience, of knowledge, and I think it's going to benefit our audience today. So let's jump to what you mentioned. You said you always knew you wanted to be the educator. Kind of take us back into those days. Let's get
Yes, I will take you through my journey, which is really a unique one, I think. A lot of people grow up and they don't really know maybe what they want to do, and they just kind of go through life. And from the time I could literally speak, I am the oldest of 4 girls. And before my sisters were even born, I was lining up my dolls. I could remember laying out these like giant coloring books as their like mats to sleep on, the dolls. And I was teaching them, and any level of schooling I was in. So at the time that was like preschool. That is what my dolls got. And then as my sisters were born and I got a little older, they were forced to play school with me. They had no options. And it was just something that I was so extremely passionate about. And I don't know why. It was just something that sat with me. None of my family were teachers. It wasn't like, oh, my mom was a teacher and I wanted to be like her, or my grandmother or anything. My father's mom was like a preschool teacher, but that's not why I wanted to teach. Like, it wasn't because I was with Nana and I wanted to do what Nana did. I just always wanted to teach. And I remember my mom asking me, what did I want to teach? And every year I would tell her whatever grade I was in, I would say, oh, 3rd grade seems kind of fun. Maybe I'll teach 3rd grade, or no, I think I like 5th grade. 5th grade might be fun. And it continued like that. And I wasn't really sure, but again, I would tutor. I started tutoring when I was 13 years old, and I just knew that I wanted to help, and I seemed to be good at it, right? A lot of people kind of fall into education, or you have the horrific saying, like, those who can't do teach. Yeah. I've heard that. And I think that, teaching is an art, right? Educating is an art. So yes, people can do it. You can jump in for benefits or whatever reason. But there's an art to getting others to understand something that they don't know.
Okay.
And so as I continued on, I applied to schools that were known for teaching. So I ended up going to Queens College, being born and raised in New York. Right. Queens College is absolutely hands down the CUNY school that is known to produce excellent teachers. And in the mail, I received a letter that stated that because of my math, SAT scores, and my my grades in math in high school, that I qualified for a full scholarship to be in a program to teach math that was going to do math education. I'm like, I guess I'm going to be a math teacher, right? And I didn't at the time, like, math was something that I was good at. I didn't really try hard at it. it wasn't something at the time that I would say I loved or was fascinating for me. What was more fascinating was that I wanted to teach.
Sure.
And so this idea of being in this program, I'm like, okay, well, this must be it. So I applied to the program, I got in, and that program, I will say, honestly, changed my life and changed how I looked at education. It taught me, it is called Time 2000 for anybody out there thinking about education in any capacity. It is a Time 2000 program through CUNY Queens College. And it really taught me, it honed my craft. So that is where I learned how to, be a reflective teacher and all of that. I got experiences that I would not have gotten in any other type of program. It was cohort based and very personal. And so I learned how to be reflective. And so from there, they really the people who graduate out of that program, we could teach anywhere in any environment, but usually we get pretty good jobs. So I got a job so I was graduating in May, and in February of that year, before I had even gotten any certifications, I had gotten a job offer. And then I turned that down because it was in a high school and I wanted to be in a junior high school. And my mom thought I was crazy because it was in a really top district, and it didn't matter to me. I wanted to follow my heart. And so I waited, and then in I want to say May of the year I was graduating, I got another job offer in a middle school to teach math 5 minutes from my house. I'm like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Awesome. And I did that. And when I did that, you could not tell me at 20 years old that I was not going to be in the classroom forever. I was going to be a teacher, a math teacher, and I was going to stay a math teacher, and I was going to live in New York, and I was going to be in the classroom forever teaching math. And that is what 20-year-old Kendal would have told you. And I thought I had landed my dream, right? I was being an educator. I was having everything that I wanted. And as I began to navigate that journey, it didn't take long for me to realize that the classroom or that room wasn't going to be my forever. And the first hiccup came when and it wasn't even a bad, I wouldn't even say like a terrible. My family started, right? I got married in that time frame. Sure. And then my husband at the time hated living in New York. Okay. And I was like, but I love New York. I don't want to leave New York. And we went back and forth for a little bit. And then we started looking at houses outside of New York and like what you could get for your money. And I said, maybe we can move out of New York, but we need to be close to New York.
Gotcha.
Yes, because all family is here, our support system. So maybe we can have the best of both worlds. Okay. And we decided on Pennsylvania and moved to Pennsylvania. And teaching, you can teach anywhere, right? Sure. So here I was in what I thought was my dream space in a top district, in a junior high school, teaching math, doing really well. And we're moving. And so moving to Pennsylvania right away, I got certified. Wait,
you're didn't pass over?
No. So what I've learned is that every state has their own qualifications, and New York is actually one of the most rigorous states to get certified in. we don't even take what's called the praxis exam. There are 3 other exams that New York takes along with other requirements. All the other states, for the most part, take the praxis. So if I would have started in another state, I probably could have transferred my scores and such. But since New York didn't follow that, I had to take certain exams. And I moved out here in June of 2013. And I took all the exams and everything by July of 2013, and I was certified, right? So I just jumped right in, found a job at a charter school, was hired in August of 2013. So like I was able to find something, and I left that charter school a couple months in just because it wasn't a good fit. And then I ended up being a gifted support teacher out here, which is different, right? Yeah. So again, remember, I wanted to be math, and I was staying in the math classroom based off of my training. I was really good at it. And now here I am. I moved and I'm finding a new job. The first job, I was a math teacher. But then I got this opportunity where they were looking for someone certified in math. Okay. But that was going to create programming to support gifted students.
Okay.
And so I did have a math class that I taught. It was like an Algebra 2, which is technically a junior class, okay, but I was teaching it to 8th graders.
Okay.
Because they were gifted in, this area. And then I was supporting teachers. So that was like my first step into administration. I wasn't an administrator, but I had to take on various leadership roles through working with many teachers, bringing together supports for students, figuring out how to create a program where students could be challenged in all of their classes or in their area. And I had to figure out how to get teachers on board with that, despite what they may have believed, right? Because a lot of teachers have very strong beliefs, different beliefs and different philosophies around students and how they learn.
Oh, no, they don't.
And so being a gifted support teacher, I learned that students that are gifted are often confused. Like, people make assumptions that gifted students are a model student, right? Sure. Often it's the opposite, because many gifted students do not care about school in the traditional sense. They care about the learning.
Yes.
And so you have many gifted students that do not come off as the model student. They actually, some of them are failing classes and things because they won't do the work, not because they don't understand, but just because they're not interested in doing something that's not going to grow them. And so it was me in this position having to bridge these two sides, the students with the teachers, right? Getting the students to understand they needed to show up a certain way, and getting the teachers to be flexible in how they, what they allow for the students, right? And how these students may need something that's different, not, the same. And so that was my first kind of, okay, this is a little different. Like, I'm not in my own space. I'm not able to do just what I want to do. I have to figure out how to work with different personalities and how to make sure that these students are getting what they need. So
let me interrupt you if I could. Yes. You've hit a bunch of critical intersections. And for our listeners that cannot see Kendal, she is smiling ear to ear, which is a demonstration of that. When that teachers that love what they do, it just shows. It's not rehearsed. It's not she puts on her teacher face. It comes out of her. So if you can't see her, you can't hear the love and joy that comes out of it. Definitely, when we have this video on YouTube, you should see the joy that comes out of it. But another thing I want to point that you mentioned out, because we have teachers that are transitioning in, and you're hitting upon something. You don't become a teacher when you just go to college or you receive the degree. Because I believe a teacher, it's in you. It's already in you. There's a gift. There's a call. There is a passion for it that you can even, as a kid, take your dolls or take your sisters and kind of role play. And, you already saw what you want to be. And I think that's great for those, future teachers, whether you're in fourth grade, you're in high school, you're in the first year of college, you're graduating in a few weeks, looking to get that first job, that it's in you, and you have to visualize that, and don't wait to get into a program to say, hey, I can be that. The next thing I want to mention is, you mentioned your first job, and kudos to getting that scholarship and saying, hey, I'm good at math. I'm going to take advantage of this free money and this free opportunity, and this free instance to go to a reputable school and teach. And then after that, you had a major life change, which is moving. And I have to unpack that because a lot of, especially teachers from certain parts of the country, we like to stay in one state,
Yes.
district. It's like a pair of socks. We stays in that. We want to stay there. I'm now in Texas, and I have teachers. They change districts like every year. I'm like, that's too stressful. I stayed in one district for 16 years. There's comfort. You build seniority. You build community. So the fact that you took the leap to now move to a different state, which required you to now have to take another exam, which is a whole nother session of challenges, because when I transitioned from New York teaching to Texas, that was 16 years later, and I had to take another test and now learn stuff I learned 16 years before that I don't use. So, you're throwing a lot of great nuggets about things that, teachers that are transitioning at the beginning of their career or through that are so important and vital. And then finally, which I'll let you go back, is you kind of, you had a hint or inkling. You started becoming an administrator before you started teaching by leading people, and also leading, the gifted population, which is, different. I have had the pleasure of teaching, either the regular popular education, the special education, and also the gifted and talented. It takes a different construct and thinking and different level of patience to navigate through all of those environments. So I wanted to pause to kind of highlight that to my audience, because, you threw a lot of great gems. And I'll let you continue about, gifted and talented, as well as, transitioning into administration.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing those nuggets. It's like, as you're telling your story in these parts, you don't really recognize, like, I didn't really sit with those things in that manner. But I think when I'm listening, the connection I make to educators in general is flexibility. And there is a high level of flexibility that's required when you want to be an amazing educator, right? Yes. The best educator. And you kind of hinted that, like, educators not really flexible. So we are so uncomfortable with change. And as I'm like sharing the story, I really didn't look at my journey up to the point I've shared so far as like having lots of change, because I just felt like, okay, I'm still on this path, and now I'm ready for the next step. And like, what does that next step look like? And it didn't feel like change to me at the time, but it was something where I was like just really in tune with what I wanted. But I want to just make sure that if nothing else comes out of this, that we do emphasize flexibility. Yes. It is so important, and it looks like so many different things. So in my journey, being open to, moving once we decided that was going to be the best decision for the family, and saying, I can teach anywhere. Yeah, I know I'm good at what I do. I'm going to find a job anywhere. math is in demand, right? Or all of these things that would be scary for someone, being able to know that and then being open to different experiences and being open to learning. Like when I moved, I just said, I'm going to teach math and that's it.
Yeah.
I had to figure out how to get certified. I had to figure out where were the schools, what were the good schools, like where was there a need? So there was some research that went into that. But now the space in the journey, we're at the next hiccup.
Mm-hmm.
So what really nudged me out of being in the classroom, right? Because now I was in gifted, I was getting the hang of it. I was feeling good. I'm like, oh, I like this. This is different, but I'm still getting the math. I'm getting to expand on that. I'm learning. And the school district was a pretty decent sized district, but it was going through some financial things. And so there were originally, I want to say 4 or 5 gifted teachers in the district. And I was in a certain school, and then they had the elementary gifted, and then they had a gifted for another area. And one of the gifted teachers was retiring. Mm-hmm. So there was going to be some reshuffling because they were not filling his position. Okay. So now the 3 of us that were remaining, so it was 4. So the 3 of us that were remaining were getting shuffled, and I was the low man on the totem pole. Mm-hmm. So long story short, because this is where that flexibility kind of rose up, right? Where I wasn't feeling mindset. Long story short, I got bumped out of my position. Yes. And ended up having to take a position for the North Campus. So originally, my gifted position was grades 6 through 8 at one school. Okay. And that is what I was getting used to. I had been there for, I think, a year or 2, maybe 2 years at this point, 2 or 3 years. And I now got bumped, and I was getting put towards our North Campus, K through 12, 3 different schools, just me. And there were less children on that whole roster than there were in just the one school that I was in prior. Wow. So it was like, wait a minute. Now, I'm not this part of the story there. We could go on a whole other tangent around what created that. But I was very upset about it, but I did it. But that move and how that move happened is what prompted me to go for my administrative certification. Okay. Because I said, you know what? I'm not going to be in this type of position where my job is just up for grabs and what this looks like. I want to be making these decisions, right? I want to be in the seat where I can actually be in the room talking about how these things are and who's going and what. And I also realized that the administrators were the ones that were having the impact on multiple children because the decisions that they were making were impacting many, many, many lives, right? In my classroom, I'm impacting a lot of lives, but when I became an administrator, I began to impact all the teachers who were then impacting all the lives. So my reach became exponential, right? That's how I looked at it. Yes. So I started that program, and I simultaneously said, I'm going to still, even though I'm upset with how this change happened, I am going to show up and do my best. By the time I left out of that position where they put me in that K-12, I had tripled the number of gifted students that were identified. So when I came in, it was actually more than triple. When I came in, there were maybe 15 students identified, K-12. Wow. And when I left, it was over 60. Wow. Okay. And that's not because I made children gifted. That was because all those children were not identified, sure. Right? And I put process and procedures in place through lining up with the law of what was supposed to be happening to make sure that all children who were gifted and who were supposed to get gifted services were getting identified. So those were ways, like through that experience, I didn't realize I was actually gaining or strengthening my skills as an administrator.
Sure.
So that program took me about 2 years, I want to say. And again, showing up as my best, right? Getting over everything, really strengthening the program, developing a system that was really strong. And then I got my certification, stayed in the position for about a year additional, and then an opportunity came up for me to be an assistant principal in a completely different school district. And the school district that I was becoming an assistant principal in was known to not have much diversity. I'll say it like that.
Okay.
And they were also a district known to not hire outside people, right?
Okay.
So they usually stayed within their district and promoted within their district, and they didn't have much. When I got the job, I was one of 2 African-American women assistant principals. There were no other ones. So it was me and one other person. And I was in that role for about 3 years as an assistant principal. And then the opportunity came for me to become principal of the building that I was in as assistant principal. I applied, went through many different things, but got the job, becoming the first African-American female principal in that district. So at the time, I didn't realize like that was history being made, because I didn't look at it like history. I looked at it like this was something I earned. But based off my experience, you know, in that space, I realized that actually was a really big deal. It was a really big deal.
And I had to unpack a few things. So one thing that stood out, and you're making it seem like, you know, Monday this happened, Tuesday, because there was bumps, and then there's, you know, a lot of things that happened to go into that story. But one of the things that stood out is you saw a need for students to be identified that were not being identified as gifted and talented. And my experience as a teacher and, you know, hearing a lot of students more on the special education side, having that struggle where their child is struggling and now trying to get those services and being identified by the district. And, you know, on the flip side, you as a future administrator kind of had that hindsight to say, okay, there are kids that are not, you know, receiving the individual attention they need. And they're maybe in a classroom where they're getting taught, but they also need additional services, just like maybe special education. They need additional services to kind of really peak and really, you know, get them to the potential on the gifted and talented side. And, you know, you saw that foresight to put some things in place to kind of grow that population. And I'm sure those parents, are thankful that the work you did enabled their child to be identified and to give the additional services that they need to flourish. And that can go with special education, that can go with gifted and talented. So kudos for that, because, you know, not only you saw a shift, but you had the foresight to kind of let me now do that work. And sometimes, you know, as a teacher, we get so inundated with trying to do our regular job. We get hints of other things that we could kind of push, but sometimes we kind of say, you know what, it's not my plate's full enough. And I'm sure, you know, that was a journey just to kind of get that, you know, going. And that's a great turnaround, an ROI, return on investment, that you were able to now get those other 45 plus students that were really should have been identified, but
Yeah.
for whatever reason, whether we didn't have the right systems in place, whatever the case is, they now were able to get the additional care and assistance that they need to help flourish. So that's the one thing.
Yeah.
So kudos for that. And then the other thing, is you had to make a decision of when to transition. And sometimes as teachers, we kind of get stuck in our rut. I only teach fourth grade, and then we kind of, stay in one position and we don't see the signs in the wall. And in education, oftentimes when someone leaves, I don't want to say oftentimes, but it happens enough where someone leaves, sometimes they access that position, or they, other people absorb, and then people get reshuffled, and you have to make a decision. Okay, is this the time for me to start thinking about my next in education, or I'm going to stay there, or I'm going to switch to a different district, and so that kudos to that, because you just said, what, I'm not leaving that to chance. I'm going to intentionally do something so that I can, see my next and have those incremental steps. Because, some of my other guests, when they talk about transitioning out, some people, this is a crucial time of the year. This is May. This is when people say, I'm not going to do my contract. I'm just going to jump into. No, wait. Or if you're going to go,
Yeah.
you have to have those steps in order to get to where you need to be, so that when you do get there, you can say, okay, this is what I did. I'm happy with the results. I can live with that, because like you said, flexibility. So kudos to make that, and also knowing when, which is so crucial, knowing when to say, okay, this is the sign, this is the time. So I'll let you continue, but I wanted to point out.
No, I think, it's so awesome when you're sharing again, because when you're living it and you're doing it, you don't often see these things in this manner, right? You see them differently. But there is something that I have noticed. So I see the world through patterns, right? As a mathematician, that's how I see the world. And I've noticed that about every 5 or 6 years, God shakes up something, right? So I was in New York for about 5 years, going into my 6th year of teaching, when I moved to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Then I was in Pennsylvania for about 5 or 6 years before I got to become an assistant principal. And then I was an assistant principal and a principal for about 5 or 6 years. And then something else came up, which we'll talk about, another time. But I'm noticing that now that's not on purpose. It's not like the 5-year mark comes and I'm like, oh, okay, something, it's time for me to go. But paying attention to what's happening around, I'm noticing that each transition keeps happening at that time frame, and it happens smoothly, right? And something happens within me where it's productive struggle, I call it, just like with the students, right? Where I'm growing and I could feel it. I start feeling maybe a little uncomfortable, or I'm saying, you know what? I've mastered everything. This is coming too easy to me now. Like, I need to be doing something else. And I think, in society in general, we like comfort. It feels good to us. But when you're comfortable, you're not growing, right? So when you're uncomfortable and something is happening to you, you brought up this point, Alex, which I think was an amazing point, where it's like, you sit and you make a decision, right? So you say, okay, what am I learning from this discomfort right now? And what am I supposed to do with this? Is this something where I need to stay put? Like, I was uncomfortable when I had got bumped out of my position. But that wasn't a moment where I decided to leave the district, right? Or leave whatever. That was uncomfortable. But I said, okay, what am I supposed to learn in this discomfort? I stayed where I was and turned that whole thing around for myself, right? But stayed in that discomfort. But then a few years later, where I was like feeling good, it was time for me, I knew, to get uncomfortable again. And that's when I made that transition to be an assistant principal. And I think for those that are listening that are not sure, a lot of times when we're transitioning to a next step, there's that uncertainty, like, am I really prepared for this? Am I good enough for this? And it's so important for us to realize that those opportunities come because we are.
Yes.
And you're going to be uncomfortable in something that you're unfamiliar with. And so it's important to sit and not let fear of the unknown, right, stop you from moving, and not let yourself be convinced that you're supposed to stay in a certain position for 20 and 30 years, because that's just not it, right? And so we sit there because we're comfortable. Now, if we're comfortable with just being that, right? But most people, even if they sit in the classroom for 20 years, they're becoming a teacher leader, or they're doing something on the side, or they're growing themselves in some way. So I think everybody's journey is different, but it is so important that as educators, that we are literally molding generations. I wouldn't even say the next generation, like generations. I can't tell you how many teachers like are having their children of their like first set of students, right? Like there are teachers, like my daughter's teacher is getting like grandkids at this point. Like you have had the mother, the child, and now the grandchild. Like they are pumping out generations. And so when you're teaching for generations like that, you're influencing generations. It's important to be a lifelong learner and to demonstrate to the students that learning is not unique to just the classroom. And so I chose to transition into administration because I wanted to make sure that that was the message that I was giving to teachers, and I was empowering teachers to begin to rethink new education to be, and realize like, wait a minute, you know, I'm not just dumping knowledge into them. I'm actually teaching them how to be a learner. I'm teaching them how to solve problems without me. I'm teaching them how to figure things out and make connections. Like that's what learning is, right? And so my transitions were because I realized that I could have, I thought differently from a lot of people. I loved this hard work. I felt good about productive struggle, and I knew that I could handle, you know, what would come with that. And I knew that I could do the work. And even being in the principal role, I was able to, through the work with my team, within 1 year's time, we were able to like double our standardized test scores and different things because of the work. Did everyone love me? No, right? I'd be lying if I said that. And we talk so much about how teachers feel and the burnout. And there were things that I did for teachers, like we created a mindfulness room, we created create labs for other things, but I really spoke to teachers about their mental health, and those things were very important. But I also made sure that there were high expectations, the same expectations I would require of my children or myself teaching my children. In my classroom, I was setting those high expectations, but I was thinking, what about all these other children, right? And I wanted to be that administrator that made sure that all the children that I came, you know, through were going to get, you know, that level of education that, you know, my little corner of the world would get. So that doesn't come with making tons of friends necessarily. Teachers either really loved me or they were really upset that I was holding them to a certain expectation, but always never holding them to an expectation that I wouldn't hold myself. Right. And so that's a whole nother, I feel like that's a whole nother podcast and talking about balance.
Let's jump into that, because again, you hit on some key things, especially this time of year. Number one, as I said before, this is the end of the year, and I hear teachers saying, "Oh, we got 5 more days. I made it." You know, you talked about mental health, and I think also that pairs along with that is not getting too comfortable in a position, because sometimes we get ourselves burnt out because it's no longer challenging. And then everything that happens, all the other stuff that comes with teaching, all the paperwork, all the stuff we call the bureaucratic stuff, then it makes us grumbling. We still love the kids, but then we're like counting the number of days at 180 days. It's difficult. Behaviors change towards this time of year. So again, kudos for being willing to be uncomfortable and say, I'm not going to stay here too long, because I know that one, there's more potential of me, and also the danger if I stay here in this too long that I might fall into those ruts, which teachers
Yeah.
And
This
then-
is a moment to stick for a second, Alex. This is
Yes.
a moment because
Yes.
it is very easy to fall into the complaining,
Yes.
right? And it's also, I would say that the burnout comes because as educators, we give so much, and it's not a job that we're rewarded through money, right?
Yes.
We are rewarded through emotion. Essentially, we're rewarded through the feeling
Yes.
of like we were giving. And it is so difficult when you're in a thankless job. Like I would always say, like, education is the one job where people who don't have a degree in it get to tell the people who have a degree like how to do it. I'm like, how does that work?
Yes.
And that's why I think a lot of educators get grumpy or burnt out, because they feel like, I am certified in this, I've had to do this work, and I'm not respected, right?
Yes.
And what happens when they feel that way is they start to not show up as their best selves because they're feeling discouraged. And now it's this never-ending cycle of, I'm not showing up as my best self, so somebody else thinks they have to tell me what to do.
Yes.
And then they're telling me and it doesn't work, and we're going in this cycle and cycle. And so part of a way to break that is I would stand strong in, this is what I know is the right thing.
Yes.
And I was not afraid of what came with making some of those tough choices.
Yes.
And I think, you have two options. You're either going to be part of the problem or part of the solution,
Yes.
right? And so it's important, as discouraging as days can be, because I would be not being honest if I sat here and said every day was perfect and I didn't have a discouraging day. You have the discouraging days, absolutely. But remembering your why, and we talk about this, I know educators don't like to hear it. They feel disrespected and all of those things, but there are a lot of things we can control.
Yes.
And so, knowing what kind of job you have is important, and knowing why you're in there is important. Being honest, venting, all of those things are very healthy things to do.
Absolutely.
But getting stuck should be a non-negotiable, right?
Okay.
And so figuring out how to be part of a solution sometimes comes with tough choices.
Yes.
It's the environment for me, right? When I first moved to Pennsylvania, the first school I ended up in, I had to leave. No matter how the children may have needed or what I felt, it was not the right environment for me. And I wouldn't have been able to do what I knew I was capable of doing.
Yes.
So that's so important. And so I just think, you bring up something really special there when you're talking about burnout and health, and also like what could create burnout. Our thoughts are so powerful, powerful. And what we continue to feed ourselves is then how we're going to speak and then how we're going to show up. And so when you keep that in mind, you can literally change the world.
And I'm gonna say right there, I think that's a good ending point for this section. Kendall's gonna come back and talk about her journey from education, and I'm sure she's gonna talk about how like she started to talk about how kudos being, African American, being female principal, but she's going to talk about, the backlash you get from teachers, because you were a teacher, now you're an administrator. But a lot of great points, and I know our listeners are definitely going to benefit from hearing again today's episode and where you're going from being administrator to being CEO and far beyond. So again, Kendal, thank you for your love for education, your commitment, the joy that exudes when you're talking about, and also being willing to take those difficult steps, being courageous, because some of us, we're not often courageous, but also seeing someone else that did it say, hey, you know what? I can do that. And this speaks to this critical time, the end of the school year, when you have to kind of reassess, not just thinking about summer vacation, but also thinking about what's next in the horizon. So thank you so much, and I hope all my listeners will tune into next time, where she talks about those next steps, those great glass ceiling adventures that she has definitely broken. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for joining us today. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode with a colleague. Remember to keep learning, keep growing, and never stop believing in your impact. You truly make a difference.